unsolved, or cases which have been, quote, solved, unquote, but which remain in great controversy. And not to be facetious or glib, as I was a couple of minutes ago in referring to the JFK assassination, but there is an excellent example. It is, quote, solved, unquote, except that 2/3 to 75% of the American people do not believe how it was solved. So in a democracy, gee, can we vote on whether a murder case has been solved or not? If there were a jury convened today of any microcosm, black, white, young, old, any part of the United States of America, then it's highly likely that that case would not come in with a verdict, which has been given to us by the Warren Commission report. But let's talk about cases of a more mundane nature. First one I want to talk about is a case which people in this area are familiar with, and it follows, as I've said, quite fortuitously, Andy's presentation from Beaver County. It's quite interesting that Beaver County has this panoply of fascinating cases. That's just one of those quirks, and maybe if you go back prior to the early 1990s, maybe you might not find any such cases in Beaver County. This is a case involving a dead woman, victim Catherine Walsh. Catherine Walsh was found dead in 1979. She worked at a local job. She was separated from her husband. She was out with some friends at a local bar restaurant. They ate and did some drinking, and they parted ways 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. When she did not appear for work the next day, her boss called. Her father went to the house. I believe he broke down the door, and he found his daughter lying on the bed, prone, her hands bound behind her back, completely nude, except for a portion of a nightgown, an upper part of a nightgown. She was covered by a sheet. The autopsy was done there in Beaver County, and it was signed out as strangulation. There was no question about the cause of death. That was not an issue at all. This is the scarf that was used to bind her hands, and the ligature was around her neck. That was not a question whatsoever. The autopsy was done quite competently. Nothing happened because while they interrogated numerous people, including her ex-husband and some others, they never had enough evidence to make a move. About then 33 years later, 2011, 2012, they went back to the physical evidence and decided that there was a stain on a sheet which could be examined. They examined it for DNA. It was a seminal fluid stain. A DNA test was done, and it revealed the DNA of a gentleman named Gregory Scott Hopkins, who at that time was still living in Beaver County. In fact, he was a councilman in one of the municipalities to which Andy referred. I think he said there were 40 of them in Beaver County. He was just a regular guy, no problems, and no criminal record of any kind. They called him in, they interrogated him. These are just some more pictures of that scarf. And they eventually charged him with murder. His story was that he had had a sexual affair a couple of times, not a long, ongoing matter, with Ms. Walsh. And yes, he had had sex with her, but not the night that she was killed. He wasn't there. As a matter of fact, he had 2 witnesses that placed him somewhere else. One in particular, a friend who said he was there at the house, and that if Gregory Hopkins had gotten up in the middle of the night, he certainly would have heard him leave and or come back. He said that about a month before, he had been there and he had had sex with Janet Walsh and Catherine Walsh, and that was the explanation for the DNA. Something that some people don't know. I think all of you do appreciate this as forensic scientists and people studying forensic science, is that DNA cannot be aged. You cannot say specifically DNA is from this day, at this moment, or so on. And we know that they're telling us about DNA of prehistoric dinosauric monsters and other things of less historical length. So that seemed to be quite plausible. Nevertheless, the case proceeded. I was contacted by the district attorney's office, and I met with Assistant District Attorney Frank Martucci. I think he was supposed to have been here, but I believe he's in trial. And that's where I met Andy, and we met and talked, I think, that at first at my office, and then I proceeded with the case. I wrote a report based upon the evidence. The case had been evaluated by an outstanding DNA expert, whom you heard from this morning, Dr. Mark Perlin, and I've known Dr. Perlin for a long time, and he is truly one of the most astute, erudite DNA experts that I know of in this country, perhaps in the world. I have great respect for Mark. His opinion was that you could not make this determination for the reason that I stated, could not be aged. The DNA was found in 3 particular places, and for me, this was extremely important. One DNA stain, seminal stain, was on the back of the nightgown, just near the waist level. The second was on a bed sheet, a sheet that covered her, just at that location, and the third was on the belt of a bathrobe, which was exactly at that level. So if you superimposed one upon the other, 1, 2, and 3, then you had that kind of physical juxtaposition.